Thank you for two interesting presentations and quite timely, I would say. I will take it from like the global perspective and put it into like a national perspective, but also look into like a local perspective. But because what are the consequences for Denmark and what will we likely see when we move into the future, especially due to a rising sea. But let me just stand on the shoulders of both Catherine and Peter. And just to say that speed is quite important when we look at the change in our climate system. Should I? Okay. Speed is quite important when we look at things in our climate system, and at least since 1850, since pre-industrial time, right? It goes much faster now compared to earlier, no matter how we compare, both present day due to the period younger dryas, but also when you look back in time, 22,000 years and compare it from 1850 to present day. So speed of change is important, right? We also see viabilities as just mentioned. The Arctic is heating up, the Northern Hemisphere is heating up, Europe is heating up. So we see changes in our climate system, changes in the energy balance, as Peter also mentioned, all over, so to say. The green one is the Northern Hemisphere, the red one is the global, and the blue one is the Southern Hemisphere. And then the black one is the Arctic area. So changes in time and changes in space. So what are the consequences for our tiny nation? Yeah, Denmark is a part of the global climate system. We are influenced by the weather around us. We are influenced by the melting ice. This is not a flooding map. This is just an illustration as just indicated to emphasize the message due to what are our concerns and what could some of the consequences be when we look decades to centuries ahead. We are challenged by changes. We are challenged by water from different kind of directions. We will see or have seen more rain over time, and that will likely continue. We will see more flooding, both from the sea, from rivers, and we will see a higher groundwater level, no doubt about, when we move decades ahead. So a big challenge here from four directions. So how has things changed in a Danish perspective? And this is just data from DMI, just highlighting the mean annual air temperature. And of course we see viabilities from one year to another, but we also see a trend over time that for Danish conditions it has been more or less 1.5 degrees warmer compared to at least 1875. More or higher temperatures indicates a higher amount of vapor in the system and also more rain. This is what we see here. It rains more on average compared to today, compared to back in time due to 1874. We also see viabilities due to how the lows are coming in. But again, we will expect that this would also continue when we move decades and centuries ahead. If you look at it in more like a local perspective, and now we look at the last 15 years, it's more or less the same trend, the same viability. Denmark has become, or that part of Denmark, like the southern part of Denmark and northern Germany, the area around the western part of the Baltic Sea has become warmer, roughly speaking 1 degree. The viability in rain is clear on annual scale, but what is also of interest is that we also see seasonal viabilities in the temperature, and especially during winter time, here indicated by the amount of frost days. And it's clear that the winter season is warmer now compared to earlier, thereby we also have a lower amount or a lower number of frost days today compared to just going back 15 years. On average for this region, it has dropped by, roughly speaking, 25 days. So one thing is change in time, but things also become more complex when we look into change in area, in geography. And this is just to highlight that likely no matter where you are in Denmark, it has become warmer due to different kind of degrees. The amount of frost days has dropped. And the variability in rain is also significant due to where the lows come in, how the surface is shaped, what are the topography, and so on, right? So it starts to be more complex when we look at things at a local scale. So one thing is weather and climate. The other thing is how the ocean is changing, or the sea level has changed, again from like a local perspective. And here we dig into 5 Danish cities, just to emphasize that what we also estimated in IPCC is that the sea is rising on average in a global perspective. The sea has risen, roughly speaking, 20 centimeters since 1900. But when we look at this, like over the last 25 years, we can see that for Danish harbors, as in Sønderborg, Forborg, and so on, it could be, it has been up to 10 centimeters in worst case, so to say, right? So also here we now see consequences due to things happening outside Denmark. So what can we expect? When we look into the future, and of course it comes with uncertainties, right? But this is a study from Peter Clark from Oregon State University, and there they compared emissions at specific years due to how the sea would likely change when we move decades and centuries ahead. And as also Peter mentioned, energy, the carbon cycle is important here, but also like the water balance and how the ice is melting, how the sea is rising. Just to say that due to the amount of emissions, the concentration in the atmosphere, they highlighted 2 scenarios, like a green and the red one here indicated by the arrows. And likely, no matter what will happen, we will see a rising sea going into the future, right? It just depends on how high and how fast we will see the changes. So this is just a part of the scientific literature, right? But how do we communicate this to the public? Because we need to communicate this both to citizens, to politicians, and so on, right? Because this is important stuff, so to say. So we had like a project, a communication project from Novo Nordisk, just to highlight what are the challenges, what are the consequences, and how well are we prepared for the future, right? And we're not that well prepared for the future. We did some examples due to like 3 Danish cities, just to make it really precise for the consequences for citizens, and what kind of debate, what kind of knowledge would we like to push into our public debate, so to say, right? This is just one city. This is Kerteminde on the island of Fyn, just to highlight that if we see a storm surge in year 2100 compared to the one we saw back in 23, what are the consequences? And these data were, or these assessments were done by DTU, but if you look into the consequences due to economic damage, then we talk more or less about 1 billion Danish kroner, right? Just for one city, right? And how many coastal cities are we having in Denmark? We're having a lot, right? So this will be a great challenge for our society on the economic side. But what about on the non-economic side? Due to humans, due to sickness, due to uncertainty, and so on, right? So there are many, many issues here we need to highlight and we need to discuss among citizens and among politicians, right? Kalundborg, the same picture. Big loss, big economic loss. Here we're talking about more than 1 billion up to 3 billion kroner in loss and damage, right? So this is really scary stuff, if you ask me, right? So what to do? Yeah, we of course need to communicate, right? We actually added one more city, Nakskov, and if we just take those 3 cities, right, the cost will be above 8 billion kroner, right? So you're looking into some challenges for our society. So one thing is the economic stuff. What about the non-economic? What kind of uncertainties will we face when we look into this new challenge, into our new society, right? And we just highlighted a few here. Sicknesses, loss of value, rehousing, economic instability, and blah, blah, blah. There are a lot of things here we need to take into account. We need to frame, we need to discuss, we need to highlight into the guys at Christiansborg, but also among citizens, right? And this will only be, I would say, even worse out in time compared to if we do not prepare and we do not agree on how to do this. And how to do it, is actually an interesting question, because we do a lot of things, but still we don't do enough. We need to understand how to transform our society towards conditions like this. And we need to communicate, and this is what we did here, just in a chronicle in one of the Danish newspapers some years ago. And according to the rising sea, we can either put up a barrier, keep the water out. We could start designing our cities, our landscapes, we invite the water in. Or we could probably start this more critical, difficult conversation about what should we do with our land? Should we have a strategy for the land being taken by the ocean, or what should we do, right? So we really need to figure out what kind of Denmark would we like to see when we move into the future, right? And this is not an easy stuff, so to say, right? Yes, I think that was my 10 minutes. Thank you.